What's up? Thank you for waiting.
Hey, Martin, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for taking the call. I have a couple questions, try to keep it short. Um,
Yeah. Thanks for waiting.
First off, yeah, when looking, so I've been doing some research into some companies that I don't actually have too much familiarity with their industry.
Yeah.
So first one I was looking at was Charles River
Yeah.
Laboratories, and I don't know anything really about biology. They used rats, medicine, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand the company. I've done a model. I've forecasted their finances and what I think is going to happen to their revenue and earnings. But if I don't know much about the industry, how in depth do I need to go about learning all the little components of their business in order to really like get a good understanding of the company?
This is the problem of investing, and this is why specialization is very helpful, and being a generalist can be a little bit difficult. Um, Here's my Charles River model. I was short this actually briefly, and I guess that seemed to work really well. I don't know if you guys remember when I was short this thing, but um, it does look attractive at this price. I'm just going to refresh some numbers here. Hold on one second. So the short answer is you really can't skimp on learning in industry. And if you're asking how to go about it, I can give you a lot of insight. If you're asking how much should you know, it's kind of one of these chicken and egg questions where it's like you got to reach a Pareto optimal. Like there is a level of like, okay, you know too much. And
Yeah,
then there's a level of like you obviously don't know enough and you don't always know which is which. I think experience will tell you. Like I've been looking into quantum computing pretty heavily, and I sort of felt like after a while I knew what I needed to know, and it's instinct more than anything that guides me on that. Because like, do I need to know how to program a quantum computer? That's probably too much. Should I have a pretty good idea of like what makes them work? Why are they special? It's probably pretty important because if you don't, like, how do you know it's not going to be the future of computing? Maybe it is going to be the future of computing. So it's a little tricky because now, what am I going to become a PhD in physics? Of course not. Nobody has the time to do that for every stock they look at. So it's super tricky. I mean, this is why there are industry specialists. But man, even those industry specialists get it wrong all the time. So what's the answer? I think it's a healthy dose of common sense. It's a healthy dose of understanding businesses in general. Like, so Charles River is a great business. It just was overvalued for a while. There will never not be lab-based animal research, right? Like this is like such a fundamental concept in medicine that the animal testing business will never disappear. In fact, if anything, it's probably going to increase, in my opinion. Now, monoclonal antibodies are a very unique situation where MABs have always been something where they don't get tested a bunch. They never really should have been tested in the first place anyway. And finally, the FDA has realized that they should stop doing it. There's not many. This is not a big business for these guys anyway. The big business is tox, and in tox, again, MABs don't really go through tox normally. So like, and tox is not going to really disappear, even for some MABs. So like to me, I think the business is really safe. I think what's weird about Charles River is like, how do they grow, right?
yeah,
And as a value investor, like, can you get? Are you satisfied owning a stock? It's kind of like IBM, where it's like, look, this company's never going to grow again. Are you okay just sitting there collecting a dividend, watching your EPS go up through buybacks, but you're not getting any revenue growth because the pharma business is not growing? And if you look at I'll just have
yeah.
their 10K open here, they haven't grown in 3 years, same amount of revenue, right? So, but is it a great business?
They were forecasting a decline as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
coming
that's
up this year.
and it doesn't mean that a declining revenue is a bad thing. Like, let's look at the capex and stuff like that. Like, this is a company that has 1.6 billion in PP&E. and they're cash flowing 600 to 700 a year. It's insane return. Imagine if you own this business. Well, net of the capex, it's a little bit less, more like 3 to 500. But regardless, you'd be very happy as an owner of this business. And but you're not the founder of this business or the current owner. But if you inherited this business, for example, and you said, should I sell this or should I, and go invest in something better, or should I keep it? The way you could look at it is, again, you have $1.6 billion of property. That property costs some money to maintain, but the net cash flow that's coming out of it is 400 million, which is around a 25% return. So you're basically making a 25% return on your capital every year. There's not too many hedge funds that can do that. So to me, it's this like just constant, compounder of cash flow, that 25% coming out every year. The question is, what can you pay for it? And it's at like a kind of legendary discount at the moment. Pharma services is, the pharma industry is going through its own trials and tribulations right now, but it's not going away for the next at least 30 years. So, and probably never going away. We'll always need medicine. What medicine looks like and what it really is probably going to change a little bit, but I kind of like this. Thank you for bringing it up. I don't need growth in my stocks. Like, I think that's like sometimes a poisonous attitude, and most growth investors will roll their eyes right now and think I'm crazy. But like, what is private equity? Why does private equity make better returns than almost any industry? Because like, it's this kind of thing. Like, if a new management team came into Charles River and cut costs and like really tried to, pass through price increases, find a way to grow through acquisition, whatever it is. Like, I bet you they could find a way to make this even better company that does $1 billion in earnings a year. And, it would be 6 times earnings in that case. So to me, I love companies like this because like these guys have been around for, I don't know, you've done more work on the company than me, but like, I want to say these guys have been around at least 50 years. And like they are the lab animal king.
It's interesting you mentioned inheritance because the current CEO is the son of the founder.
Oh yeah, that's why I think that's probably what my neural network was configuring as I was thinking about this, right? And maybe it's time for him to go. Private equity would pay like 30 to 50% premium for these guys now. And again, it's the most like stable, legendary business in kind of pharma services, life sciences, because these guys have just been, they've been around for so long. And if you need lab animals, whether you're academic or pharma, there's no second player. Like, and then, to do tox services, to do all this other stuff, I think they do all that stuff too. Like toxicology is a bit of a meme, but remember, these guys could really benefit from tariff stuff because this is, it's a services company, but guess where I used to do all my talks? I'm not doing it in America. I'm doing it overseas. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that, this is a company that's a homegrown American company. Could they, literally Charles River or Boston, right? And, could they potentially, be a beneficiary of tariffs where Trump administration says, yes, we want to reward you guys for being an American company doing high-end American work. Those toxicology tests are not simple. They're a little gruesome, but they're not simple. And to have this American science company dominate, and let's not use WuXi as much as I like WuXi, it's a Chinese company. And if we're going to do this American patriotism thing, let's all move our business to Charles River Labs. And, it's interesting because I don't know have they been growing by acquisition?
Yeah, they have been making a lot of acquisitions. Like, they're buying firms that sell like monkeys from like Mauritius.
I saw that deal. Yeah. But like, is it a huge cash outlay that they're paying? Because like they are growing technically. It's probably not organic.
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. They normally complete like 2 or 3 acquisitions a year.
I mean, they're growing. It's probably all inorganic, but they are growing. I think that they've doubled the size of the business. So if they can do like prudent acquisitions, technically they have been growing. So, it just last time I looked at it, it was like super expensive. But as I look at it now, I mean, it's actually kind of attractive. So I appreciate, like I said many times, like I got cassava, which I made $1 million on through this community. And then quantum as well. We were actually super early to quantum, and I was kind of constructive on it, if you guys remember, and then it went through this crazy bubble. So like this kind of stuff is really helpful to me because just like you, I don't know what stock to look at, which is why I made Godel. It's a great terminal for stocks once you know what to look for, but it's also a community where you can look and find new companies by chatting with people. And so is this stream. So Charles River, I still want to, like you said, I want to dig in more and like really understand, like, has their revenue makeup shifted a bit since these acquisitions? But if it's all mostly animal and pharma testing, you can sort of, like, one of these types of companies, they're just industrial companies that are like boring. Like this, they're not a lot different from like an HVAC company or like, some of these really like old slow companies, because at the end of the day, like, yes, you should understand what it is they do, who their customers are, what the outlook for changes are. But like at the end of the day, if they're like super diverse, I'm sure animal testing is still a big chunk of their business, but like this is a stable company. Like if you look at their revenue and their products, like it doesn't feel like, this is something that's that dynamic. And that's kind of a good thing. Obviously, you still have to be very vigilant and understand it all, but I kind of think this is a steady grower, and just doing the diligence on the animal stuff would be where I would focus. And to me as a pharma guy, there's not much that's changed in the animal world and unlikely to change anytime soon. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I don't think there's too much. I think the big thing in terms of the animal segment is how much companies are willing to outsource and like how managed the service would be of where the animals are stored. Do you hire your own workers?
I think everyone outsources. There's a couple of big pharmas that insource, but nobody wants to do the animal work because it's so rote. It's like there's no reason to do it in-house. If like, unless you're like Pfizer, and even then, like people use CROs for trials. They used to do trials in-house, and now everyone uses contract research. So you just take like the difficult part of the work and you send it out. And I think that I'll tell you this, every single biotech in the world and any pharma below a certain size will not do toxicology in-house. So now there's a lot of different kinds of tests. It's not just tox, but yeah, tox is something where like you can actually, if you want a little bit of a hint here, the FDA does these reviews of drugs before they approve them. And oftentimes you can see where the tox study was done. It's kind of, I wouldn't say leaked, but it's kind of like in the filings. And it's a really interesting thing sometimes to see who's doing it internally or externally. Everyone's external. Like I've seen so many drugs, they're always doing these tox studies, at some other company. But yeah, these guys have grown from 1.8 in revs to 4 billion. They've never had a year where they dropped a lot of revenue. Last year was a little slow. The year before that was a little slow. But like, as long as they keep churning out earnings, these guys will still be here in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, Like, could they atrophy? Sure, it's possible. But it seems to me like a really good long. I don't know did you think it was a short?
No, actually, my valuation of it was pretty similar to what it was trading at 2 months ago.
Oh.
And it has dropped a decent amount over the past year or so, but I was undecided on it. I was more so doing it as an exercise in terms of learning the industry and almost has in the past year.
You learn this industry super well, and then the problem becomes like all that knowledge you just gained does not apply to any other company. Because it's like, how many companies are in this space? Not many. Like here's a list of life sciences diagnostics companies. basically the knowledge you get from Charles River, basically none of it applies to these other companies. They might be a customer of some of these guys. So there's a little bit of that food chain effect going on. So you will learn something. Like it's not totally, useless. But like, that's the difficulty of looking into some of these fragmented spaces. Like in pharma, every company's the fucking same. So it's really easy to look at. But in life sciences, all these guys are a little bit different from each other. No two companies are exactly alike. Anyway, thank you so much for jumping in. That was really cool.